When 7-year-old Alina Trent froze in the middle of a crowded airport terminal and pointed at a stranger, her father thought she was just being curious. But what his deaf daughter had noticed, what no one else in that sea of travelers could see, was a silent cry for help that would expose a nightmare and change 3 lives forever. Because sometimes the most important signals aren't heard with ears, they're seen with the heart. And when a 10-year-old girl's desperate plea went unnoticed by hundreds of people, only one 7-year-old understood what she was really saying. Before we continue, please tell us, where in the world are you tuning in from? We love seeing how far our stories travel. Hartsfield-Jackson Atlanta International Airport, October 15th, 11:47 a.m. The terminal buzzed with the controlled chaos that only the world's busiest airport could orchestrate. Announcements echoed overhead in that particular cadence that made every destination sound urgent. Travelers rushed past with rolling luggage, checked their phones, grabbed coffee, completely absorbed in their own journeys. Just another Tuesday before lunch. Just another 1,000 people passing through Concourse T, headed somewhere else, thinking about somewhere else. Jonah Trent walked through the crowd with his daughter's hand in his, navigating toward the main terminal with the easy confidence of someone who'd traveled enough to know the rhythm. And Alina bounced beside him with that particular 7-year-old energy that made everything an adventure. "Daddy," Alina signed with her free hand, her fingers moving with practiced fluidity. "Can we get lunch now? I'm hungry." Jonah looked down at his daughter and felt that familiar warmth that came with watching her navigate the world. Her brown curls were pulled back in a ponytail, her purple backpack bounced against her shoulders, and her brown eyes sparkled with excitement. To anyone watching, they looked like any father-daughter duo traveling together. But Alina's world was completely silent. Jonah signed back smoothly, his hands spelling out the words with the precision that had taken him years to perfect. "Yes, let's find something good. What do you want?" "Pizza." Alina's hands flew up enthusiastically, her smile wide. Jonah chuckled and was about to respond when Alina's hand suddenly clamped down on his with surprising force. Her entire body went rigid. "Daddy." Her free hand moved in sharp, urgent gestures. "Look at that girl." The tone, if sign language could have tone, made Jonah's protective instincts flare immediately. He followed his daughter's gaze through the crowd. About 30 feet ahead, weaving through the stream of travelers, walked a woman and a child. The woman stood out in that specific way that money always does. Late 30s, maybe 40. Designer purse, the kind Jonah recognized from magazine ads. High heels that clicked against the polished floor with purposeful precision. Expensive outfit, immaculate hair, the bearing of someone who was used to getting exactly what she wanted. She walked fast, determined, not looking back. And behind her, connected by a tight grip on her thin arm, walked a girl. The child looked about 9 or 10. She wore a red sweater despite the warm October weather, jeans that looked slightly too big, and sneakers that seemed too small. The kind of detail you only noticed if you were really looking. Her hair hung limply around a pale face. She was thin. Not just naturally thin, but the kind of thin that made Jonah's stomach turn. The woman pulled the girl along without gentleness, without acknowledgement, like luggage. But none of that was what had stopped Alina in her tracks. It was the girl's hands. Behind her back, where the woman couldn't see, the girl's small hands moved in quick, desperate gestures. Jonah felt his blood turn to ice. Help. The sign was clear, repeated. Then another. Please. Then another, more frantic. Help me. The girl's fingers trembled as they formed the words, over and over, a desperate rhythm that matched her steps. Her face remained blank, expressionless, but her hands behind her back screamed silently into the crowd. Bad. Danger. "Daddy!" Alina's hand flew up, signing frantically, her young face twisted with fear and urgency. "She's signing. She's deaf like me. She's saying she needs help. Something's wrong." Jonah's mind raced. He'd been active in the deaf community for 4 years, ever since his wife Evangeline died, and he'd had to master ASL to communicate with his daughter. He'd heard the stories, the warnings. Deaf children were particularly vulnerable. They couldn't scream, couldn't call for help in ways that hearing people would immediately recognize. They were often overlooked, underestimated, invisible in emergencies. And this girl, this terrified girl signing desperately behind her back while hundreds of people walked past, was invisible to everyone, except his daughter. "Stay very close to me," Jonah signed to Alina, his jaw tight. His hands moved quickly, firmly. "Do not let go of my hand." "Are we helping her?" Alina signed back, her eyes wide but determined. "Yes," Jonah signed. "We're helping her." The woman moved through the crowd with the kind of purposeful stride that discouraged interaction. She checked her phone once without slowing down, her expensive nails tapping against the screen. The girl stumbled slightly, and the woman yanked her upright without even glancing at her, like she was an inconvenient piece of luggage that kept tipping over. The girl's hands never stopped moving. Scared. "Help! Please help!" Other travelers passed within inches. A businessman in a suit rushed by, talking loudly on his phone about quarterly projections. A young couple laughed together, wheeling matching luggage. A college student with headphones bobbed his head to music. An elderly woman paused to check a departures board. No one noticed. To them, it was just a woman and a child walking through an airport. Maybe the kid was tired, maybe shy, maybe cranky from travel. Nothing remarkable, nothing worth a second glance. But Alina saw, and now Jonah saw. He pulled out his phone and dialed 911, keeping his eyes on the woman and girl ahead. 911, what's your emergency? I'm at Hartsfield-Jackson Atlanta International Airport, Concourse T, heading toward the main terminal. There's a child here who's been signaling for help in sign language. She's deaf. She's with a woman who appears to be taking her somewhere against her will. The child is terrified and has been signing that she's in danger. I need police here immediately. Sir, can you describe the individuals? Jonah provided details: the woman's appearance, the girl's red sweater, their direction of travel. The dispatcher assured him officers were being notified and asked him to maintain visual contact if possible without putting himself at risk. The woman stopped at a departures board, checked something on her phone, then changed direction toward Concourse A, toward the gates, toward flights that would take them somewhere else. Jonah's heart pounded. How long until police arrived? How long before this woman got on a plane with this terrified child? The woman and girl entered a restroom. Jonah positioned himself outside with Alina, his heart pounding. His daughter's hand gripped his tightly, her young face serious in a way that made her look much older than 7. "Is she going to be okay?" Alina signed. "Yes," Jonah signed back, hoping desperately that it was true. "We're going to make sure she's okay." When the restroom door opened and they emerged, Jonah made a split-second decision. He stepped directly into their path. "Excuse me," he said, keeping his voice calm but firm. "Is your daughter okay?" The woman stopped. Her head turned toward him slowly, and even behind the dark sunglasses, Jonah could feel the coldness of her stare. "My stepdaughter is fine." Her voice was clipped, sharp, the kind of voice that was used to making people back down. "We're late for a flight. Move!" She tried to step around him, pulling the girl with her. But Alina had already moved. Before Jonah could react, his 7-year-old daughter slipped from his grasp and stepped directly in front of the older girl. Her small hands moved in clear, careful signs. "Are you okay? Are you safe?" The girl's eyes went wide. Her mouth opened slightly. For a moment she just stared at Alina, as if seeing a ghost, as if seeing hope materialize out of thin air. Then her hands flew up in response, moving so fast Jonah could barely track all the signs. Her face crumpled, tears spilling down her cheeks as her hands spelled out her terror. "Not safe. She's taking me to bad people. She sold me. Please help. Please. I'm scared. She's going to give me to people in Miami. Please, don't let her take me." The woman's hand shot out and grabbed the girl's wrists, yanking them down violently. "Shut up," she hissed, her mask of composure cracking. "Stop that. We're leaving right now."
"Nobody's going anywhere," Jonah said firmly, stepping forward. His voice carried now, loud enough that other travelers began to notice. "I've already called police. They're on their way." The woman's face contorted with rage and panic. She tried to push past him, her grip on the girl's arm white-knuckled. "Get out of my way! This is my stepdaughter, and you have no right!" "Let go of her," Jonah said, his voice dropping to something colder, something that came from growing up in rough neighborhoods where you learned when words weren't enough. "Now." A security guard noticed the commotion and started walking quickly toward them. More travelers stopped, sensing something was wrong. The woman looked around, realizing she was attracting exactly the kind of attention she didn't want. "Help!" Jonah called out clearly. "This woman is trying to take this child. Someone call security." The security guard broke into a jog. "Everyone stay where you are." The woman released the girl and tried to bolt, but Jonah shifted to block her path. She stumbled backward, her designer purse swinging wildly, her composure completely shattered. "I haven't done anything wrong. This man is harassing me." But the girl had collapsed to her knees, sobbing silently. Her hands moved in desperate signs towards Alina, who knelt beside her, putting a small hand on her shoulder. Airport police arrived within 90 seconds, followed by 2 federal agents who'd been stationed nearby. As soon as they arrived, everything shifted into official mode. The woman was separated from the girl. Jonah explained what he'd witnessed. Alina, with the seriousness of someone much older, signed to an officer about what the girl had said. One of the federal agents, a woman in her 40s with kind eyes and the bearing of someone who'd seen too much, knelt down next to the girl. She began signing. "Hi, sweetheart. My name is Agent Martinez. You're safe now. Can you tell me your name?"
The girl stared at her with disbelief, as if she couldn't quite process that someone official, someone with authority, could actually speak her language. Then, slowly, her hands began to move. "My name is Brielle Moreno. I'm 10 years old." And then, with an agent who could understand her, with safety finally within reach, everything poured out. Brielle's hands moved quickly now, the signs tumbling over each other, in her desperate need to tell someone, anyone who could understand what had been happening to her. Agent Martinez listened, her expression growing darker with each revelation. Another agent stepped in to translate for the officers who didn't know ASL. Brielle's story emerged in fragments, pieced together between tears and trembling hands. She'd lost her hearing at 5 years old to meningitis. Her father, Felipe Moreno, had been her protector, learning sign language with her. 8 months ago, Felipe died in a construction accident in Jacksonville, Florida, a crane collapse. Brielle had been left with her stepmom, Diane, who Felipe had married 3 years earlier. Diane had never really learned to sign. After Felipe's death, Diane received a life insurance payout, $50,000 meant for Brielle's future. Diane gambled it all away in 3 months. Diane had debts, bad debts, the kind that came with threats. And Diane had connections to people who offered solutions to desperate people with no morals. Brielle had found messages on Diane's phone 2 weeks ago, messages that made her blood run cold. The girl, 10 years old, deaf, so can't talk or scream, $50K when I deliver her, Miami contact will handle transport. Diane was selling her, delivering her to people in Miami who would take her somewhere she'd never be found.
She'd been trying to signal for help since they entered the Atlanta airport. Over and over. Behind her back, where Diane couldn't see, desperate, terrified. But everyone had just walked past. Until Alina. Agent Martinez's face was grim as Brielle finished. She stood and walked over to where Diane was being detained, her wrists now in handcuffs. "Ma'am, we're placing you under arrest for attempted child trafficking, conspiracy to commit child trafficking, child endangerment, and about 6 other charges I'm going to enjoy adding," Agent Martinez said coldly. "You have the right to remain silent. I suggest you use it." "This is ridiculous. I haven't done anything." Diane's voice rose to a near shriek. "We have your phone. We have your text messages. We have your search history. And we have a very brave little girl who just told us everything." Agent Martinez leaned closer. "You were selling a 10-year-old child, a deaf child, who lost her father and trusted you to keep her safe.
You're going to prison for a very long time." The color drained from Diane's face. She stopped talking. Another agent approached Jonah, who was standing with Alina. Brielle sat on a nearby bench, still crying silently. "Mr. Trent, I'm Agent Davidson. What you did today?" He paused, seeming to struggle with the weight of what he was about to say. "Sir, you saved this child's life. Most people wouldn't have noticed. Most people who noticed wouldn't have acted. You and your daughter stopped something that would have destroyed that little girl." Jonah felt his throat tighten. He looked over at the bench where Brielle sat. Alina had walked over and sat down beside her. The older girl looked at the younger one, and Alina signed something simple. "You're safe now. My daddy keeps people safe. You don't have to be scared anymore." Brielle's face crumpled again, and she reached out. Alina took her hand. Two deaf girls. One 7 years old, who'd noticed what no one else could see. One 10-year-old, who'd been signing desperately for help, invisible in a crowd of 100.
The investigation that followed revealed the full scope of what Brielle had been spared from. Diane Brennan's phone records led federal agents to a trafficking network operating across 3 states. The Contact in Miami was part of an organization responsible for the disappearance of at least 32 children over the past 4 years. Children who'd been sold by desperate or evil family members, then transported out of the country to places where they simply ceased to exist. Brielle would have been number 33. If she'd made it to Miami, if Diane had handed her over to the Contact waiting at that airport, Brielle would have been on a boat within hours, bound for locations that specialized in exactly the kind of nightmare that keeps parents awake at night. Agent Martinez explained this to Jonah later, when the official statements had been taken and Diane had been transferred to federal custody. They sat in a quiet corner of the airport police office while both girls dozed in chairs nearby. "Deaf children are targeted," Martinez explained quietly. "Traffickers see them as ideal victims. They can't scream. They can't call 911. They can't easily communicate with strangers who might help them. Brielle tried to tell someone she was in danger, but hundreds of people saw her today. Your daughter was the only one who understood what she was saying." Jonah looked over at Alina, curled up in a chair with her backpack as a pillow. His daughter. His brave, observant daughter who'd frozen in the middle of an airport because she'd seen someone who needed help. "What happens to Brielle now?" Jonah asked. Martinez sighed. "Child Protective Services will take custody. We'll search for family. Felipe had relatives in Mexico, but we're not sure where or if they can be located. Diane's family have already indicated they don't want involvement. So for now, Brielle will go into foster care." "In Atlanta?" "Most likely. She'll be placed with a family here while we conduct the investigation." Jonah watched Brielle sleep. Her thin frame barely made a dent in the chair. Her face, even in sleep, looked wary. "Will the foster family know sign language?" Jonah asked quietly. Martinez hesitated. "We'll do our best to place her somewhere appropriate, but there aren't a lot of foster families in the system who are fluent in ASL." "But she'll be alone," Jonah finished. "She'll be in a house with strangers who can't even talk to her." Martinez didn't argue. They both knew it was true. Jonah and Alina flew back to Indianapolis the next day. The conference he'd come for no longer mattered, but Jonah couldn't stop thinking about Brielle. He called Child Protective Services in Georgia. He called federal agents for updates. He learned that Brielle had been placed with a foster family in suburban Atlanta, a nice couple, well-meaning, but neither of them knew more than basic fingerspelling. Brielle had shut down completely. She didn't eat much, didn't sleep well, sat in her room and stared at the walls. She was alone in the most fundamental way a person could be alone. "Daddy, we have to help her," Alina signed to him one evening, 3 days after they'd returned home. They were sitting at the dinner table in their small house in Indianapolis, and Alina's food sat untouched. "She must be so scared. She needs a family who can talk to her. She needs us." Jonah looked at his 7-year-old daughter. "Sweetheart, it's complicated," he signed slowly. "She lives in Georgia, we live here, and I'm just one person.
I work full-time. Taking care of you is already— Anywhere, Alina interrupted, her hands moving emphatically. I'm a good helper, and Daddy, she doesn't have anybody. Nobody who can talk to her. Nobody who understands. When Mommy died, I had you. Who does Brielle have? The question hit Jonah like a physical blow. Who does Brielle have? Nobody. How could he walk away from that? How could he let Brielle disappear into a system where she'd be just another case file, another deaf kid that the world would fail to truly see?
Over the next 2 weeks, Jonah called Georgia CPS repeatedly. He spoke with Brielle's caseworker, a tired-sounding woman named Patricia. She's not thriving, Patricia admitted. The foster family is trying, but the communication barrier is significant. Brielle won't engage. What if I wanted to be considered? Jonah asked. Silence on the other end. Mr. Trent, you live in Indiana. You're a single father who works full-time, and you've known this child for less than a month. Are you really prepared to give her a family? To give her a home where people can actually communicate with her? Where she won't be alone? Yes, I'm prepared. The process was complicated. Interstate adoption laws, background checks, home studies, financial reviews. Agent Martinez and Agent Davidson provided statements supporting his character. And every other weekend, Jonah drove to Atlanta. 6 hours each way, leaving Friday after work, staying in a budget hotel, spending Saturdays with Brielle, driving back Sunday. The first visit, Brielle wouldn't even look at him. She sat in the foster family's living room, staring at her hands, her thin shoulders hunched. Jonah sat down across from Brielle and signed, "Hi, Brielle. My name is Jonah. Do you remember me from the airport?" No response. Alina plopped down next to Brielle on the couch and started signing about her week, about her school, about her cat, about absolutely nothing important, just talking as if it was the most natural thing in the world, not expecting responses, just being present. My teacher is really nice, but she gives us too much homework. And there's this boy named Marcus who keeps trying to copy my answers. My cat's name is Whiskers, which is a terrible name, but I named her when I was 4. Brielle didn't respond, but I saw her eyes flick toward Alina once, twice, the tiniest crack in the wall. The second visit, Brielle signed a simple "hi" when they arrived. The third visit, she asked Alina about her cat. The fourth visit, she cried. Jonah wasn't sure what triggered it. One moment, Alina was showing her pictures on his phone. The next, Brielle was sobbing silently, her thin body shaking. Jonah moved to sit beside her, and she didn't pull away. He put an arm around her shoulders and let her cry. Alina pressed against her other side, and they sat like that for 20 minutes while Brielle grieved everything she'd lost. When she finally calmed, her hands moved in slow, hesitant signs. "Why are you here? Why do you keep coming back?" Jonah signed carefully. "Because you matter. Because you deserve people who see you. Because you're not alone anymore."
I'm broken, Brielle signed. My dad is dead, and Diane, she tried to— Her hand stopped. You're not broken, Jonah signed firmly. You're hurt. You're grieving. You survived something terrible, but you are strong and brave. But I couldn't save myself, Brielle signed. If Alina hadn't seen me, but she did see you. And you know why? Because you didn't give up. You kept signing. You kept trying. That's not weakness. That's courage. Brielle looked at him with eyes that had seen too much. What happens to me now? Jonah took a breath. I'm working with your caseworker and the court system. I want to adopt you. I want you to come live with us in Indianapolis. I want to give you a family where everyone can communicate with you, where you'll never feel invisible again. Brielle stared at him. Why would you do that? You don't even know me. I know you were brave enough to ask for help, Jonah signed. I know you survived losing your father. I know you're sitting here grieving and scared and still finding the strength to have this conversation with me. That tells me everything I need to know. But I'm deaf and I have nightmares. I'm scared all the time. Why would you want to deal with that? Alina's hands flew up. Because we're a family. Daddy and I both want you. And being deaf isn't a problem. And families help each other with the scared stuff. Jonah added, You're not a burden, Brielle. You're a person who deserves love and safety and a home. That's what I want to give you, if you'll let me. Brielle was quiet for a long moment. Then she signed, Can I
think about it? Of course, Jonah signed. Take all the time you need. But as they were leaving, Brielle stopped them at the door. Her hands moved in a small, tentative sign. Thank you for not forgetting about me. Jonah felt his throat tighten. I could never forget about you. 4 months after the airport, on a cold February afternoon, Jonah sat in his living room with Patricia, Brielle's caseworker. The court has approved your petition, Patricia said. All the interstate requirements have been met. Brielle will be placed with you starting next week. Jonah felt something enormous shift in his chest. Relief, joy, terror. She knows, and she's ready.
The following Saturday, Jonah and Alina drove to Atlanta one more time. But this time, they weren't leaving without Brielle. In the car, as they pulled away and headed north toward Interstate 75, Brielle sat in the back seat beside Alina. Both girls were quiet. Brielle stared out the window. After about 30 minutes, she tapped Jonah's shoulder. He glanced in the rearview mirror. "Are you sure?" Brielle signed. "Are you sure you want me?" Jonah pulled the car over. He turned to look at her directly. "Brielle, I promise you this," he signed slowly. "You will never be alone again. You will never be in danger again. You will never be invisible again. I will protect you. Alina will be your sister, and we will be your family. Not because we have to, because we want to, because you deserve this. Do you understand?" Brielle's eyes filled with tears. "But what if I mess up? What if I'm too much trouble?" "You're not too much trouble," Jonah signed firmly. "You're my daughter, and families don't give up on each other." Alina leaned over and signed emphatically. "You're stuck with us now, forever and ever." Brielle laughed, a small, broken sound that was equal parts sob and genuine amusement. Then she signed, "Okay, I want to be your family. I want you and Alina." Jonah smiled. "Then let's go home." The adoption was finalized in May, 5 months after that February drive. The judge looked over the paperwork, then looked directly at Brielle. "Young lady, do you understand what's happening today?" The court interpreter signed the question. Brielle nodded and signed back. "Yes, Jonah is becoming my dad, legally, forever." "And is that what you want?" "Yes," Brielle signed emphatically, "more than anything." The judge smiled. "Then it's my great pleasure to finalize this adoption. Brielle Moreno-Mitchell, welcome to your forever family." Alina squealed and bounced in her seat. Jonah felt tears finally spill over, and Brielle smiled. A real, genuine, unguarded smile that transformed her entire face. Afterward, on the courthouse steps, Alina threw her arms around Brielle and signed, "See, I told you, you're my sister forever now." Brielle hugged her back and signed, "I don't want to get rid of you, even though you're really annoying sometimes." "You're annoying too. That's what sisters do." Jonah watched his daughters tease each other and felt something he hadn't felt in years. Not just contentment, not just relief, but genuine, complete happiness.
The transition wasn't easy. Brielle had nightmares regularly. She'd wake up gasping silently, terrified until Jonah or Alina came to remind her where she was, that she was safe. She hoarded food in her room, a trauma response from the months with Diane. Jonah didn't make a big deal about it. He just made sure the pantry was always full. And gradually, Brielle stopped hiding granola bars under her mattress. She flinched at unexpected touches, had panic attacks in busy places that reminded her of airports. But slowly, Brielle began to heal. She started sleeping through most nights. She laughed at Alina's terrible jokes. She joined a deaf youth group in Indianapolis and made friends. She let Jonah hug her without going rigid. 9 months after the adoption, Brielle came to Jonah while he was making dinner. "Can I talk to you?" she signed. "Always," Jonah signed back. They sat at the kitchen table. Brielle's fingers moved slowly, carefully. That day in the airport, I'd been trying for so long, and everyone just walked past. Hundreds of people. Nobody saw me. She paused. Why did Alina see me when nobody else did? Jonah thought about the question. Alina sees the world differently than hearing people do. Being deaf has taught her to notice things others miss. Body language, facial expressions. She looks for details that hearing people ignore. But it's more than that, Brielle signed. Lots of deaf people passed me too. It wasn't just that she could understand the signs. It's that she looked. She paid attention. She cared. You're right, Jonah signed. Alina has a kind heart. She looks for people who need help. Like you, Brielle signed. You could have just called security and walked away, but you didn't. You weren't a stranger. You were a child in danger, and I couldn't walk away from that.
Brielle was quiet. Then she signed, I used to think being deaf made me invisible, like people looked through me instead of at me. But, Jonah prompted gently, but you and Alina proved that wrong, Brielle signed, her eyes bright with tears. You saw me when I was signing for help. You see me every day now. You made me part of your family. You made me visible. Jonah felt his throat tighten. You were never invisible, Brielle. You just needed people who knew how to look. I was thinking about all the other kids who nobody sees, who nobody helps. Brielle signed. It's heavy to think about, Jonah signed. But maybe that's why I survived. Brielle signed. Maybe I'm supposed to tell people that deaf kids matter, that we're worth seeing, worth saving. You're incredibly brave, Jonah signed. To survive what you survived and want to help others, that's extraordinary. I learned it from you, Brielle signed simply. You didn't have to help me, but you did. Alina wandered into the kitchen then. What are you guys talking about? Brielle signed. How lucky we are to have each other. Alina grinned and plopped into a chair. Obviously, we're the best family ever. Jonah laughed and stood to return to dinner. As he stirred the pasta sauce, he thought about the strange path that had led them all here. His family had been born from tragedy, forged in the crucible of an airport terminal where a child's silent scream had finally been heard, built on the foundation that everyone deserves to be seen. 1 year after the adoption, Brielle asked to visit the airport. Jonah wasn't sure it was a good idea, but Brielle insisted. She'd been talking to her therapist about it and felt ready. So on a Saturday in May, the three of them drove to Indianapolis International Airport. They walked through the terminal together. Brielle stopped at the spot where the plane to Atlanta would have departed from. She stood there quietly. This is where I would have flown from, she signed, if it had happened here instead of Atlanta, if you weren't on that plane, if Alina hadn't seen me. But I did see you, Alina signed matter-of-factly, because I pay attention. Brielle smiled and pulled her little sister into a hug. Yes, you do. She turned to Jonah. I wanted to come here to remember. Not the bad parts, but the good part. The moment when someone finally understood. When I realized I wasn't alone. I'll always help you, Jonah signed. That's what family does. I know, and I want other kids to know that too. That even when it feels like nobody sees them, there are people who do. There are Aliyahs and Jonahs in the world who pay attention. They stood together in that airport terminal, three people who'd become a family in the most unexpected way. As they walked toward the parking garage, Alina skipped ahead. Brielle walked beside Jonah, and suddenly she stopped and signed, Dad. It was the first time she'd used that sign without adding his name after it. Just Dad. Jonah stopped walking, feeling the weight of that single word. Yes, sweetheart? Thank you,
Brielle signed, "for seeing me, for fighting for me, for making me part of your family, for being my dad." Jonah pulled her into a hug, and Brielle didn't stiffen or pull away. She hugged him back. "You're my daughter," he signed when they pulled apart. "You're mine, and I'm yours, and Alina is your sister, and we're a family, forever." "Forever," Brielle signed, smiling. "I like that word." "Me too," Jonah signed back. They caught up with Alina at the garage entrance. The three of them piled into the car and drove away from the airport that had changed all their lives. In the rearview mirror, Jonah watched his daughters signing to each other, laughing, being sisters. And he thought about that day in October when Alina had grabbed his hand and said, "Look at that girl." One moment of noticing, one choice to act, one decision not to look away. That's all it had taken to save a life. Sometimes the most important thing you can do is see someone who feels invisible. Really see them. And when you do, when you choose to notice, to care, to help, you might just change the world. Or at least, you'll change someone's world, which is just as important. If this story touched your heart, I want you to do something for me. Share it. Send it to someone who needs to hear it, because somewhere out there's a child who needs to be seen, who needs someone to notice, who needs someone to care enough to act, and maybe, just maybe, that someone is you. Thank you for staying with me through this story. Thank you for seeing Brielle, for understanding why Alina's observant heart mattered so much, for recognizing that sometimes the smallest choices create the biggest impact. If you made it this far, leave a comment and tell me, who in your life taught you to really see people? I read every single one, and I want to know your story too. Until next time, keep your eyes open, keep your heart soft, and remember, everyone deserves to be seen.